Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the deferred sales trust or investing in passive multifamily or active real estate, is the best way for you to grow your wealth. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swartz. In each episode, I am joined by some of the best real estate, financial, business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He is on a mission to help you improve your life through real estate investing. In fact, his story starts back in Washington, D.C., when his partner and him met as neighbors, and the background in the military created an opportunity to take the fundamentals to the real estate investing world. Please welcome to the show with me, Scott Lewis. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Would you give our listeners a little bit more about your background and your current focus?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Spartan Investment Group. We focus heavily in self-storage, and we do everything from finding our own deals, funding our own deals, and then operating them both from an asset management, property management, and also construction management, and when we have expansion potentials.
Excellent. So you've got the vertical integration going on. I love that you're in self-storage. We don't have a lot of self-storage folks on the show. We should have more because and I definitely want to dive into the show here. Most of us are the multifamily, senior housing, and mobile home parks. So we'll dive into that. Before we go there, though, would you give our listeners a little bit more about your background as it pertains to growing up? You know, I want you to go back to maybe it's the earlier days of university. Maybe it's your early days of high school. You know, I believe we've all been given certain gifts, Scott, and these gifts are given to us to be a blessing for others. So I'm curious, maybe it's one of those one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, so I think kind of like shooting back to high school to kind of talk about why I'm in real estate today. You know, my summer jobs in high school were framing houses. I've never worked in a restaurant ever, even to this date. I always preferred to be outside, kind of working with my hands, and I really enjoyed the built environment. So that's kind of really my interest in real estate started in high school, and then I went to college, and I majored in chemistry and marketing, and then graduated, went into biotech sales. So not a lot of real estate there. I did buy a condo in Chicago in 2005. Not a good investment. Still have that, selling it today. Probably going to lose 20 grand on it 15 years later. So there is still some devastation from 09 and 08 being wrought over on this side of the house. But kind of came in, did that sales job for about 5 years. And then I saw some bad things happening at the top of that organization. And I'm kind of a big on integrity and loyalty. And there was some pretty not good stuff. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And that caused me to kind of start looking around and figuring out hey, what am I going to do next? I looked at MBA programs. I went and I got another job for a month. And I was like, wow, I don't want to do this. So something I'd always wanted to do was serve my country. So, okay, well, I guess I'm going to quit my job, take a 80% pay cut, sell everything I own, and go to basic training. And that's what I did. And then for about 4 years, I was active duty, and I came out and then worked for the federal government for a little while. And then finally started Spartan, and it's kind of gone from there. And you talked about kind of a special skill. I think one of the things that probably other people would say that defines me is my discipline. I'm a pretty disciplined guy. I go to bed about 8:45, 9 o'clock at night, and I get up at 4:30 almost every single day. And I think that's probably the one thing that really kind of defines me and defines my success.
Beautiful. Absolutely love that. And by the way, you can find and learn more about Scott Lewis at Spartan-investors.com. In fact, to date, some of the numbers are pretty incredible. $42 million in equity raised, $126 million of assets under management, 10 completed projects, over 6,000 plus units. And I love that, Scott. So let's dive right into your strategy and what brought you to, I guess, really self-storage. I want to focus on that one, I think, for the most part. Talk to us about the unique advantage of self-storage and why you and your partner, Ryan, find it so attractive.
So we like storage because, well, one, I hate people. I don't want anything to do with multifamily. I don't want anything to do with anything residential for a couple reasons. One, it's just, when you're dealing with any homesteads, there's a lot of government hands in that cookie jar. And I, for one, don't like the government telling me what to do with my investments. And then two, kind of tying into that, I believe in contracts. And if I uphold my end of the bargain, I want my customers or tenants to uphold their end of the bargains. And if they don't, I want the opportunity to sever that contract and recover my asset. In the multifamily space, unfortunately, as a lot of multifamily operators have seen in the last, call it 12 months, that's not going to be the case because the government will step in and control your operation. And the government really doesn't care if you go bankrupt or not. So they're going to protect the individual. For storage, how many individuals got protected? None, zero. They don't really care about grandma's old rocking chair and their stuff. So with storage, a little bit more freedom to kind of operate within the values that we wanted to operate within. And quite frankly, we just didn't want to be a part of an area that was growing very rapidly. Multifamily has great returns and it's a really solid asset and such. It's been in vogue recently and everybody has been jumping into it. When we go to the conference, everybody was talking about multifamily. So we kind of decided to carve out our own little niche and go with self-storage. We had some experience with it with my cousin building it kind of as I was growing up, and just seemed like a pretty easy thing. Like it's a concrete box that people put their stuff in. It's pretty simple from a concept, not so much from an operational standpoint. It's definitely probably a little bit more operationally intensive than a multifamily because it's an active business. It's not, it does have a real estate component to it, but there's also a very active business to it as well.
Yeah, very well said. And we'll dive into the operation part of it here in a minute and you guys' efficiency and how efficiencies that you've created with your systems. But I can't help but comment on the fact that, it sounds like you found the freedom to invest in commercial real estate without all of the government headaches or the big, big hand jumping in and telling you what you can and can't do. Is that a fair summary?
It is. Yeah, at least now. I mean, there's some of the states that New York, California are kind of taking eyes at it, but we specifically stay away from both of those states. So
yeah, I'm on the front lines in California, so a lot of my listeners feel your pain.
Yep.
and are part of that right now. So let's dive right into deals that you're finding and what that looks like to work with you from a high net worth individual's standpoint, a credit investor, I presume. Let's walk through where you're finding it or where you're developing it, and what that's looking like right now.
So, I mean, we look in a lot of different markets. There's no one particular market that we look at. We look at about 31 different states, about 153 different CBSAs, core-based statistical areas within there. Our deals are usually value add deals. So there's a little bit of fur on them in some way, whether it's operational upside or an expansion potential with some lease up. And that's kind of what we're really looking for.
Excellent. What's the best secret to finding quality value add self-storage opportunities?
So we have a lot of proprietary methods that I'm not willing to kind of divulge out there, but I think if you kind of get yourself out there and you become an operator that folks know and trust, that the deals will find you.
Excellent. Fair enough. Same way on our side too with the deferred sales trust, where it's proprietary and protected. So we'll share the secrets after the NDAs or you're doing a deal with us. So appreciate that. The where are you finding some deals, right? Where do you talk about maybe geographical trends or folks, especially moving out of California to different parts, like, a lot of my friends go to Tennessee, go to Texas, they go Florida, people fleeing New York to go to Florida. I think Denver's pretty solid as well. Can you talk to us a little bit what you're seeing and how that affects self-storage investing?
So it's really hard. My answer is going to be kind of not great for you because storage is such a local business. It's really hard to talk about it from a macro scale because in our world, it's 1, 3, and 5 mile rings based on population centers and demand. So you can find an amazing deal in North Dakota, Florida, Texas, like Nevada, California. If you're willing to operate within the constraints of the California business environment, it's actually a great market because of those like really high barriers to entry. So it's one of those things that there's no like magic bullet as far as like what market, because Denver is considered macroly overbuilt in a really saturated market, but micro, I guarantee there's corners of Denver that could probably still use a storage. There was a public storage being built at an intersection that I drive by on a, I don't know, monthly basis. They just built it. So if public is building there must be demand. So it's really hard to kind of segment that down.
No, fair enough. And where are you buying versus building ground up? Is it a mixture of both?
Mixture of both. So we try to limit how much raw land development we do, just because there's a lot of exposure with that, with going through the various permitting process, whether it's matter of right or some sort of conditional or special use permit. So we try to do 1 to 2 at a time until we break ground, and then we move on to the next kind of entitlement phase. Just a risk mitigation strategy.
Sure. Let's shift a little bit. Our title of our podcast is Capital Gains Tax Solutions. So I'm curious, what's the biggest frustration you, client, or partner has when it comes to capital gains tax deferral options or lack thereof?
So I think that's one of the good things for passive investors is self-storage. When you do a cost segmentation study on a self-storage, almost everything is depreciable. So what we've seen kind of on average is about 25%, 20 to 25% of the purchase price generally comes through in a cost segregation study that we can then, through the tax laws, do accelerated depreciation. And we normally do it over 2 years for the accelerated and bonus depreciation that we get through storage. So it's actually a very good asset class for deferring capital gains. If you're a professional investor, if you're not considered a real estate, of course, you're limited on how much losses that you can take. But that's one of the huge things to our investor class is the amount of depreciation that they can offset against other investment income or their active income.
Excellent. And then from there, when you go to sell, what's the plan when you exit these? Have you taken any deals full cycle yet, or are most of these just long-term holds?
So what we've done, like one of our key disposition strategies is to recapitalize the asset. So when we buy it as kind of a value add play, the returns that we offer are in the value add return spectrum. But when we're done with it, it's more of a core plus asset. So the return spectrum by market is a little bit lower. So what we normally do is recap with a new financing structure, and all of our current investors have the opportunity to stay in just in the new structure. So that's generally that's our preferred course of action. We do have one right now that we are going to end up probably selling, and we haven't developed the strategy because it'll be a capital gains kind of issue because we have not put it into service as a rental property. So it's going to be considered inventory and subject to some other tax stuff. So.
Well, we might have a solution for you called a deferred sales trust, and you might be interested in taking a peek at that. So interesting on the recap part. So what you're saying is, are you like refinancing and then paying out investors, and because it's a refinance, it's therefore not taxable? Is that a fair summary?
No, there's definitely some tax implications. Okay. We've really had, because of the way that we structure our deals, we don't do a fund. So we have individual investors coming in and out. So from some of the like more complex strategies, we've not investigated because quite frankly, it's one of those things that we are trying to kind of grow, and those complex strategies, they just require like threading the needle on there. And instead of like at scale with investors coming in and out of deals with everybody having kind of their own tax consequences, it's been very difficult to try to leverage those strategies that an individual could use versus a group of individuals that don't necessarily have the same objectives at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly right. And same thing with the deferred sales trust. It's got to be $1 million minimum, right? And typically at least $1 million gain. And so we've structured deals where the GPs just do it, and then the other LPs are just going to pay their tax because it just doesn't work for everybody on everything. So but the key is to have multiple strategies, right? Cost segregation, buying new deals, right? Potentially using a 1031 exchange, potentially doing a Delaware statutory trust, maybe doing an opportunity zone, and clarifying those options. You can learn more at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. if you want to learn more about that. That being said, Scott, for clients who are just getting to know you for the first time, what are some questions they should be asking either you or other commercial real estate operators that they are not?
It's a great question. I've given a presentation on this multiple times because I think it's one of the things that new investors, they can often get enamored with the financials and the numbers, and they chase returns, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is an amazing deal." That stuff matters. However, it is not your primary concern as a passive investor. Your number one concern, and the time that you should spend the most due diligence on, is the operator, the team that is going to be operating that. And I specifically use operating because there's a lot of folks out there that are raising money for other people right now. So as a sponsor, I would say as an investor, that's probably one of your first things that you need to understand is who you're actually giving your money to. Are you giving your money directly to the operator, or are you giving your money to a syndicator that is just putting together the money and giving it to the operator? Either one is okay. You just have to understand the due diligence that's required of each one of those courses of action. So in either one, it's the operator that you really need to be doing a lot of due diligence on and digging into kind of their team, their experience, their track record, understanding their decision making. And for that, I'll kind of caveat that. There's a book out there by Annie Duke called Thinking in Bets. And she talks about decision making having two components, luck and skill. So sometimes you have a really skilled decision that just doesn't quite go your way because, a pandemic, but it was still a good decision and a skillful decision. It just, the operating environment changed on you where you couldn't control it. And then on the flip side, here in real estate over the last 10 years, there's a lot of people making really bad decisions, lacking skill and processes, but they're getting lucky because of cap rate compression. Those are the ones you have to be careful of because you can't replicate those in a systematic way. So I would say that's kind of, your top things to look for. And when you look for experience, be careful with the gray hair syndrome. A lot of people see somebody that's, I'll call it gray hair because I'm just hating on gray hairs because I'm jealous because no hair. Just because you have gray hair and you have lots of experience, doing something really poorly for 30 years might not be as good as doing something really well for 2 or 3. So just understand to make sure that experience is good and relevant to what they're trying to do.
Yes, so well said, and so much wisdom there. And you say Andy? Is it Annie Duke? Is that what you said?
Annie, female. She was a psychologist turned poker player. Annie Duke.
Annie Duke, and Duke, like the University Duke.
Yep.
Okay, Annie Duke. I have to check that out.
That's a great book.
Thinking in Bets. And I also want to touch on, you're absolutely right? Because everyone can have a business plan, or like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, right? Or you hit the nose, right? Yep. And now all of a sudden you're going, have they been through this, challenge, this adversity? How did they execute last time, right? What's their track record? And that's with anything in life, whether it be you getting an ACL reconstruction. I had 2 knees done, played basketball in college. Whether you're in the military like Scott, and I imagine that obviously applies on, and you got to make sure that the team's going to execute given the challenges that are coming up. And experience doesn't necessarily mean performance, right? Just because you have a long-term experience doesn't mean you've actually had any long-term performance. Is that a fair summary, Scott?
It is. And I would also, the one other thing I will say about experience, pay attention to tangential experience. Just because somebody didn't invest in 08 and 09, because I wasn't investing in 08 and 09. But you know what I did do? I did lead troops in combat. So I know a thing or two about being in a bad situation and getting myself out of it. And some of the skill sets that are the leadership and decision-making skill sets for any tough situation, whether it's a market shift on you in real estate or like bullets flying at you from the enemy. The skill that you have in staying calm and assessing your operating environment and making a good, solid decision based on factual information in a tough environment and not allowing emotions to take over. So just because an operator didn't live through the last downturn doesn't mean that they don't have some tangential experience that could make them like really good on the investing game from a decision-making component, because that's ultimately what it's about, is how well you make decisions given a current operating environment.
Yeah, so much wisdom there, Scott. And by the way, you can learn more about Scott Lewis at spartan-investors.com. That's spartan-investors.com. With that being said, Scott, are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you would make sure you would tell yourself to do?
Listen to audiobooks, because podcasts weren't around. When I was my 25-year-old self, I was driving in the car as a regional sales manager for hours and hours and hours, and I didn't listen to audiobooks. Like, huge mistake.
Excellent. What is some of the best leadership advice you have ever received?
So it's not about you, it's about your team. When I was a company commander in the military, it's about 160 soldiers. My brigade commander, which is 2 levels up above me, says, I don't care what you do. I'm going to look at your company, and if they're ate up, so are you. So really focus on your team. And if they're doing well, everybody will think you're doing well, even if you're not.
So much wisdom there. What's the one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
So for new folks starting out, as far as like if they want to kind of build their enterprise, or folks that are trying to leave their W-2 job and become a real estate investor, I highly encourage you to read The E-Myth Revisited. I think that's a fantastic book to truly understand what entrepreneurship will be like when you actually get out here and do it. And then just kind of a general book that I really like. It's a military book, but it's by Jocko Willink, called Extreme Ownership. That's a great book, just kind of across the board for accountability, which I think is huge.
Absolutely. Like, second that. I read that book at least twice now. I got to read it again. It's one of a kind. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now, Scott?
So honestly, like we're in buy mode. So we are growing our team. So we are hiring like crazy. So if there's anybody that's interested in positions, check us out. And then same thing, we're trying to buy. We want to place $150 million this year into the storage space, which that's quite a lot for our space with our average deal size of $5 or $6 million bucks. So anybody that's got deals, bring them to us. So those are the kind of people and deals. It's probably kind of across the board for all your guests.
Yeah, well said. I think capital is easy right now. Finding quality deals that make sense is the hard part. And so, and then of course, finding quality operators who have experience like yourself is also, you want to make sure you have all 3 of those. Number one negotiating strategy or wisdom.
So one thought, one tip. So my one thought, 2 ears, one mouth. Listen more than you talk. For a couple reasons. One, you'll understand the other side's point more. And then also you'll seem a lot more interesting. The more you talk, the less interesting you are to other people. And then a trick.
That's what my wife says too. What do you mean, man? You're hurting my feelings.
So, and then a trick. If you are in a negotiation and you're the type of person that likes to talk, take your tongue and shove it in the top of your mouth in the front of your teeth. You cannot talk with your like tongue up there. So it's a way. It was a sales guy tip when I was in my early 20s that I use till today, and it stops you from talking.
Beautiful. So much wisdom there. Love it. What are you curious about right now?
Psychology. So kind of in my role as the CEO, I don't even read real estate books anymore, because as my team is growing, we're at 35 now. We'll probably be at 40 by, call it, the end of May. My role as the CEO really now is to get this team to perform as best as it can. And to do that, you have to understand human beings more than anything else. So that's kind of where I'm really reading a lot on, is team development and psychology. So I'm super curious on that. So much so that I'm going to self-teach my kind of self to almost have a degree in psychology, because I want to understand it that much.
It's beautiful. Yeah. By the way, Ideal Team Player, Patrick Lencioni, and any of these other books are absolutely amazing for all of that. Last question, Scott. After all your success in the military, thank you for your service. After building your real estate team to 30 plus employees, all of the deals that you've done, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to reach for higher goals?
So this sounds cliche, but this is really why I do it. It's not about me. There's a term out there, servant leadership, that I think gets played up in the press a little bit. But the main reason I started Spartan was not because I wanted to make a lot of money, or not because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm really not. The main reason I wanted to start Spartan is because I hated everywhere else I worked. And I wanted to create an environment where my team could grow personally and professionally, like every day of their lives. So there's no end to that. So there's not like I'm going to achieve some sort of metric, because as the company grows, there will be new challenges that I need to meet in order to keep living that vision of mine, to have the organization that allows people to come in and truly thrive in their life. It kind of comes from the military. It's kind of a whole life type ideology that, I mean, work is a huge part of everybody's life, and they should be able to grow not only professionally, but also their personal goals as well.
Beautiful. And that sums up the name of the show, Improving Your Life Through Real Estate with Scott Lewis. Scott, I want to thank you for being on the show. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to find you?
They can shoot over to the website. Anybody that's interested in investing, there's a Invest Now button over there. Anybody that's interested in engaging the team, I can be reached at scott@spartan-investors.com.
Excellent. That's spartan-investors.com. Scott, thank you for being on the show. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy to exit your business or real estate or other highly appreciated asset, such as the deferred sales trust, is the best way for you to grow your wealth, or getting with someone like Scott and investing in self-storage facilities, okay? Operators that have a proven track record. Reach out to Scott Lewis today. Hey, we so appreciate everybody. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, by the way, to learn about the deferred sales trust. And until next time,